You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am in this room with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
This is where we always are. Same old, same old.
It's a great environment, though.
It's a great day to be in love.
So, obviously, I think that both you and I would have many things to say if we were critiquing the way that individuals are educated to be therapists today in our society. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a lot that we think could be changed about the way that we are educating people who are learning to be mental health workers. And there's a lot of things that we think could be redacted from the current protocol, but then there's other things that we think would be beneficial to be added. Is that also fair? I mean, are we on the same page so far?
Yeah. And
one of the things that I have become more aware of this felt very stealth to me. I didn't realize this until I started thinking about it, but what do we do to educate people in the mental health profession about disabilities?
So for the most part, in my experience, that kind of approach is limited to being incorporated into a class that says you have to learn about minorities, and saying people with disabilities are a minority. And then you focus on Asians, Africans, adopted children, Jews. I mean, you identify specific minorities and say, if you're going to work with this population, well, this is what you need to know about them. But there's not, in my experience, there's not a more broad exposure to understanding the prevalence of disabilities and the variety of disabilities, and saying, are there general global things that we should learn about recognize these and helping people either accept and understand them, deal with them, be in a room with them. I would say to you, my wife and I were having this conversation because we both spent time as classroom teachers and we're both certified by the state of Missouri. You can't get a teacher's certificate in the state of Missouri without having taken a course on dealing with exceptional children. And they call them exceptional children.
Right.
They don't call them kids with disabilities. But at least they make the effort, which in this conservative state I think is a step in the right direction. There has to be a level of openness to the concept to start to say, wait a minute, maybe there's something here I need to learn, something I need to know, a sensitivity that I need to develop. And more than just about racial or cultural divisions and distinctions. We can talk all day about white privilege and get a bonfire going in the middle of the room about whether or not there is such a thing and whether or not we have it and can deal with it, should deal with it. But what about health privilege? What about being in a room with somebody? I remember having students in the counseling program, 2 students that were married, they were both blind, and they were trying to learn to do therapy. And the people, and we talk so much about the importance of nonverbal communications in therapy and reading nonverbals. And my blind students would contend in the group class that they were in, we can read your nonverbals. We can sense where you are. And some of the visually not impaired students just wouldn't buy it. They wouldn't hear it. They wouldn't consider it. They're like, no, there's no way you can do counseling. There's no way you can do therapy if you can't read somebody's eyes. If you can't read some, and they said, you listen to the breathing. You listen to the postural shifts. There are ways to do this. I remember having a student in the program that I taught in that was pretty severely physically handicapped, had to get around in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, was very limited in his physical capacity.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Mentally, wasn't
Super
impaired.
sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember subsequently the head of the program eventually bounced him from the program because they said, well, there's no way this person can actually practice in the field of therapy. And we can't afford, as a university, we can't afford to support their licensure, because eventually somebody, one of their clients, can come back and sue the university saying, you set us up for licensure and he's not qualified. I think that's a discussion that this article suggests needs to be had.
Yeah.
Is it valid? Are there things to talk about?
So then there's two sides to this.
Yeah.
So there's the side of, do individuals with disabilities have unique experiences that need to be understood
Or
if you're going to
sensitivities.
counsel them? And then the other side of the coin is, do individuals with disabilities have the skill sets that are required to do therapy themselves? And I had only been thinking about this coming from the perspective of, when you are counseling a client, are you aware of the predilections that these individuals might be coming to you with? I had never thought about this other side of the coin, but you make a great point.
I'm a professional.
That, do these individuals, are they appreciated within the confines of the educational systems? Because I remember this guy, and I think he eventually did get back into the program and graduated, and I know he did, because he eventually went on to actually start a foundation.
Yeah.
And he was extremely successful in his career. I mean, I lost track of him eventually, but he was extremely successful because he had a niche. He was able to be a model for other people.
Message for clinicians to hear and teachers to hear. We all serve a different market. I am not the best teacher for every student in the world. There are students whom I cannot understand. There are students whom I cannot stand. And so if I feel that way about you, then there are two paths forward for me. One is open myself to learning more about you as an individual,
right,
and see if I can address whatever triggers you're setting off in me by your existence. And the other is, can I teach you to be open to these realities? Can I teach you to approach me in a hearable way instead of a defended way or an angry way? And what becomes the dynamic then between us as an educational system? One of us student, one of us teacher. You can also, the article talks about the reality of being a teacher with a disability in a course about disabilities. And they use the word disability, which I'm not sure is the right terminology, because it defines a limitation.
And I think that's a part of what the article is trying to make the point of, which is, these aren't limitations.
We see it as a negative. We see it as a less than.
Right.
And so if I approach you from the standpoint of, you are automatically, by definition, less than, the power dynamics in our relationships and the openness to consideration change.
Right.
So this article is saying, in general, universities should incorporate in their beginning psych classes, in their psych departments, because a lot of students, over 1 million students a year in American colleges and universities, take introductory psych.
Right.
No matter what their field of study is. So this author is suggesting, in that course, there needs to be a section of the course that's focused on sensitivities to differences. How do we spot them? How do we understand them? How do we recognize the limitations that are imposed societally on these individuals? And can we internalize some growth ourselves about our cognitions, our feelings, our expectations, our openness to learning?
But, I guess, so I contextualize what this article is saying very much the way that I would contextualize awareness and sensitivity to different cultures. So in the African American culture, African American women specifically oftentimes say, everybody wants to touch my hair, and why do people want to touch my hair? And that's not a thing that I like, and I don't like people just walking up and touching my hair. And so that's obviously not a thing that I would encourage people to do. I would encourage people to be aware that that's not a thing that you do. And so when we think about disabilities, are we talking about it that same way? You don't go up to somebody in a wheelchair and say, hey, can I help you across the street? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't know. I'd have to ask the person in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
If I offer to be helpful, does that offend you?
But that's exactly what I'm wondering, because the article talks about ableism. So the stereotype or the bias, the assumption that because I'm able, I should help somebody who is impaired. And I would wonder, is that what we're talking about? Are we saying that we don't offer assistance to these individuals because they don't want it? Do we ask, would you like assistance? I mean, this is something that I really struggle with.
So clinically, one of the analogies that I often use with clients from any perspective regarding any issue is you have to deal with reality. You have to figure out objective reality to the best of your ability. And then consider, are the issues with which I'm struggling in life contributing to the existence of this, and is there something I can do? The analogy that I would offer to them is, you have to swim the river. You have to swim the river. There's no option about it. You've got to do it. Is it helpful to carry this load of rocks on your back or in your backpack? If we can show you ways to take off the backpack or take some of the rocks out of it, would that be beneficial? Because you got to swim the river either way. So you want to carry these rocks, or you want to put them down? And it's up to you. You have a choice. So I would say the same thing in terms of this conversation about disabilities. We need to have it. This is a reality. I remember talking to a student that wanted to be a surgeon, but they literally could not deal with the sight of blood.
Yeah, that's got to be
the reality of blood. They get sick every time. They couldn't find a compensatory strategy for doing surgery and looking at the blood, or having to deal with the blood, the texture of it, the smell of it, the heat of it, or other body fluids, I would assume, but we focused our conversation on blood.
Yeah.
And so he said, I can't be a doctor. And I said, I'm not sure that that's true.
There's a lot of doctors.
There are other kinds of doctors who don't actually do surgery.
Yeah.
And now there's technology that allows you to do robotic surgery from a distance. Wonder if you could do it that way. So let's explore possibilities rather than limitations. And that would be an approach that I would encourage people who are looking at this whole topic of exceptionality.
Right.
And say, do you view exceptionality as a limitation?
Right.
And is it worth having a conversation about why? Why is that a limitation? Realistically, what are the limitations? Obviously, if I am in a wheelchair, I may not, if I'm wheelchair bound, I may not be able to run a race, a 5K, a 10K. But I can race in a wheelchair.
Right.
I can play basketball in a wheelchair.
I was going to say,
sword fight in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Well, you and I, we love to snow ski.
Now, we've seen handicapped
and we've
skiers
seen all number. We've seen blind skiers.
Yeah.
We've seen individuals who are in wheelchairs, individuals with one leg, individuals with both legs amputated, skiing, and skiing better than us. And so
harder runs.
And so obviously these disabilities are not limitations necessarily. We don't have to think of them that way, but because this is only just entering the zeitgeist of both our society, I think, but also education as it pertains to the helping professions. And I think we need to think about, how do we think of this? How do we educate people to be sensitive to this? And to do that, I think we need the individuals who have disabilities to inform us. My question is, where do you get, how many individuals with disabilities do you need to give you input? Because they're going to have different opinions also. And so I think that this question is a little bit of a minefield, because not every single person with a disability wants to get treated the same way.
Exactly.
Some people want help across the street. Some people don't.
Right.
So is it okay to ask? Or should you assume that they don't unless they appear to be struggling? I mean, I think these are the kinds of conversations that need to be okay to have.
Yeah. We need to learn those skills.
Yeah.
And we need to learn that sensitivity. How do we approach it?
Yeah.
From both sides of the perspective.
Yeah. Let's go to our break and let's pick this up on the other side. Hey everybody, Dr. Michael Mahan here from Psych with Mike, and I couldn't be more excited to talk to you about Athletic Greens, which is a new sponsor we have here on the show. I started taking Athletic Greens, watching some YouTube videos and doing my own research. I wanted to add something to my daily workout program to give me some energy and to support gut health. And that was the one thing that kept coming up again and again with Athletic Greens, is the guy who started the company did a bunch of research because he was having some gut health issues that he couldn't get any resolution for. He developed Athletic Greens, and it's just exploded from there. So it's 75 superfoods, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, whole food sources that's all in one daily scoop. You put it in 8 or 12 ounces of water, you shake it up, and you drink it. The taste is very, very drinkable. I actually enjoy it, and I have been using it, and my energy levels have just been through the roof. I really like Athletic Greens because of some of the sustainability things that they do. So they buy carbon credits and, to help protect the rainforest, which is something that I really like. But if you order Athletic Greens in your subscription, you're going to also get a year's supply of their vitamin D supplementation and 5 free travel packs. And that vitamin D is so important during those winter months when we're not getting enough sunlight. We've talked about how that decreases your mood and increases depression, and that can be a real deal changer. So you go to athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's athleticgreens.com/EMERGING. That's the Psych with Mike promo, and you're going to get that additional vitamin D support for a year and 5 free travel packs. So take control of your own health today. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. And so you agree that that's the direction that the conversation needs to go in?
Well, I was thinking over the break. We speak regularly about Maslow, the hierarchy of needs. I think a lot of these discussions become possible when there's a higher level of functionality and survival. So when we're worrying about, am I going to be able to eat today, we're not going to be open to a question about, philosophically, should I be more sensitive to asking a visibly limited capacity person, would you like some assistance? Can I carry your bags of groceries into the house for you? So as we raise our eyes from the horizon of immediate need, there becomes an opportunity for sensitivity and experimentation. So we have to be sensitive to that too. How desperate am I today in my own little world of survival? And culturally, the more open our culture can be depends in some measure on how subsistence level our survival needs as a community are. So people have better educations, people have more money, people have more skills, have more freedom of opportunity to say, hey, I could reach out here in this way. An example for the conversation, in the St. Louis area, every major intersection that you get off of the interstate, there are beggars who are carrying signs, homeless veteran, pregnant with kids, need help, Christian man, need help, whatever. I mean, you read the signs. If you look behind the facade of that, you learn that there are groups that manage these people and take all their money.
Yeah.
And if you, as a sensitive person, want to be helpful, this is not actually helpful to the group that you're trying to help.
Right. Who's the English author that wrote? He had the kids, and they went out and they begged, and then he took their money. And
that was in the movie or play Oliver. Dickens.
Charles Dickens. Yeah.
You think about Fagin, reviewing the situation.
Yeah.
So there are groups that run this and make good money. I mean, it's just cash coming in. It's not taxable cash.
Exactly.
It disappears somewhere. If you follow these people away from their street corner, you watch them change clothes, get into nicer cars, and drive away. So then you're like, well, I was violated. Well, you actually weren't. If you gave in to the temptation to be helpful, that's not good for you. But if you think it through and find out about it, it's not the best way to help people that are food insecure or shelter insecure. There are community systems where the churches that have food stores that give food to people that are hungry. That's a better use of your helpfulness.
Right.
And
I know that there used to be a guy who lived in our area, and we would see him all the time on the road, and he was obviously homeless, and he always had a dog, and initially he had this German Shepherd when we first met him, and so my wife taught me this, and so I will give her credit for this. She never gives anybody money. Right. But she always has extra bottles of water. So whenever she would see somebody on the street, she would say, "Here, do you want a bottle of water?" Yeah. If they said no, well, then you're not really in a
I know
position.
People who do that with like gift certificates to McDonald's or something, and say, "Here, I'll buy you lunch."
Yeah. And if you don't want that, then you don't want help. But this guy, when we saw him, we would always give him, water, and he would open the water. He was always very, very appreciative. Yeah. He would open the water, and the first thing he would do would be to give the dog a drink.
Yeah.
That was always his first thing. Yeah. And then he would drink himself. And that was a guy that I said, I don't know that I would want to live like that, but that guy lives a life where I think he's got his priorities in order. I don't know why he is choosing to be homeless, because clearly he had skills. He could go get a job if he wanted to. And this was, and maybe he didn't feel like he was choosing that.
Why would you say that? Well, clearly he had skills. Why would you say, how do you know that?
Because he gave the dog a drink first.
And so that makes him employable as a...
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, maybe he, or not obviously, but maybe he had some mental disorder that made him unemployable. I don't know. Okay. I don't know why people are living on the street. And maybe that just shows my own ignorance.
Well, but I think we all have those, if not blind spots. I'm aware that I am really impressed and grateful that there's a family grocery store system in the St. Louis area that hires handicapped workers. Mm-hmm. I think that's marvelous. They are good community citizens for doing that. They teach these people skills for survival. They employ them. They pay them a paycheck. They enable some of them to live independently because of this. I think that's awesome. But I'm also aware that when I go to the store, I get frustrated if it slows me down. If it takes me more time to go through the line. Or if I'm going through the line and they're all chatty because this is their social contact as well as their employment, and I'm not in the mood to chat. I need to get my groceries and go home. I got something else I have to do. Now, that's on me. And that causes me to stop and look at it and say, well, wait a minute. Why are you being this way? What's going on here? But I am still grateful that this store in this community behaves in this way. But I have to look in the mirror too, and I see myself as selfish, self-absorbed, frustrated, angry. Sometimes I avoid those lines. I say, well, I see which clerk is working this checkout lane. I'm going to go to the other one because I don't want to have a conversation with that clerk, or I don't want that clerk to deal with my stuff because they're so slow. And yet, in the greater expectation, I'm grateful that they have a job and that they're there.
And do you think that it is that dichotomy is okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's real. It's human.
I was just going to say, but I
cut
think
myself
that's
some
okay.
slack for it.
Yeah.
And periodically, I ask myself to challenge it.
Right.
Get in this line.
And
Open your eyes, learn something. Don't be self-absorbed. But other times, I'm like self-indulgently self-absorbed.
You know this because we've had conversations about this. I'm blind in one eye. So I've never considered that a disability. But I've had other people tell me, I mean, if you close one eye and try and live your life, you're going to find that pretty difficult.
Well, in the short term, I am. If I put a patch over one eye and walk around, I'm like, oh my God, Mike is really.
Yeah.
But you've been this way most of your life.
All of my life.
So you've adapted.
So I've never known anything different.
Right.
But I remember going to school and being in gym class.
Right.
And we were playing baseball, and the coach who was trying to teach us all how to be men, was really encouraging people to just fire the ball in there and throw it, and I can't catch a ball to save my life. And that ball hit me in the face.
It's a depth perception concern.
And the coach was just irate. Why didn't you catch that ball? I'm like, you think I wasn't trying?
Yeah.
So, but we never had a conversation of, hey, I'm blind in one eye, and so I have no depth perception, and so I can't do this. And so I'm not trying to equate that to being in a wheelchair or anything else. I'm not trying to do that. But what I'm saying is, I can understand how people with disabilities would like to perceive themselves as completely 100% normal given the context of their life and want to be treated that way, because I've never even considered I could get a handicap license plate.
Yeah.
I mean, I qualify,
right.
But I've never even considered that because I don't perceive myself as disabled. And what I wonder is,
you don't see it as a limitation?
No.
Yeah.
It's never occurred to me that it was.
You couldn't get a pilot's license.
I could not get a pilot's license.
Yeah. So if you really want to be a pilot, that'd be a problem.
But sometimes my wife will say, if we're driving someplace where, we have to parallel park my Jeep,
right.
which is a fairly big vehicle, do you want me to park? And it doesn't offend me. I say, yeah, absolutely. I would love that because it's difficult for me to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but I wonder, is that how people with disabilities, and that's why I think we need to have the conversation, because is that how people with disabilities would like to be treated? If that is how they would like to be treated, then I'm not sure asking somebody in a wheelchair if they want help across the street is appropriate.
But I don't think you can make an assumption for a group.
You can't, because everybody's an individual.
It's trial and error, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is that so now if there's a rule, right, for one person, that rule might be different for another person. How am I supposed to know that the rule is different for different individuals? And that's where I think the conundrum comes in.
Yeah.
Is I don't want to be insensitive. So if you want help across the street, I want to provide that. But if you don't, I don't want to inject myself into your life that way. And that's where I feel like I need education in this area.
Your argument is that if I see someone physically limited in their capacity to come across the street,
yeah,
and I approach them and say, can I help you go across the street? Then I'm defining them automatically as being a member of a category that is less than.
Right.
And the alternative interpretation, and an alternative interpretation is, I'm trying to be a helpful, supportive person and make contact.
Yeah.
And that typically in our society, what we learn is don't see, don't look. Mm-hmm. You hear parents taking little kids out in public, and the little kids will say, oh, Daddy, look at that.
Yeah, don't stare at that man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know that there is a global answer. I would say there's a personal answer.
And I don't think
I would say you don't have to be 100% consistent. Give yourself permission, just like giving donations to the guy at the street corner.
Right.
Sometimes you have the urge, even though you intellectually know this is probably a scam.
Right.
But I'm going to feel better about myself today. I'm going to give myself permission to say, hey, I was trying to be helpful, so I'm going to give the guy $5.
Right.
So you give him $5. Don't then go angry and say, I bet I was just robbed.
Yeah.
Say, you know what? I did what I wanted to do.
Right.
That to me is the operative factor. If I do what I want to do, if I be the person I want to be, then that's it. And if they don't like it, that's on them.
And I would love to talk about this for a whole lot longer, but for the last couple of minutes that we have, I'd like to go back and talk about, so in the very strict context of how we believe individuals who are learning to be brand new minted psychotherapists, what do we think is the way that we should incorporate this into an educational process? Because it is lacking. There's none of this being done right now.
So going back to my two students that were blind, they were married to each other. And they really caused a lot of opening of our eyes. And I was happy that they were in my class. And because I was teaching a group therapy class at the time. And how do you conduct group? How do you participate in group with people who are blind, or as someone who is blind, as a participant or as a therapist?
Right.
And one of my challenges to them, these two students, was how aware are you that you too communicate nonverbally? You're saying you're sensitive to my reactions or his or her reactions, and you pick up on that, and then you're offering interpretations to that based on your perspective. But are you aware that we are watching you, your face, your expression, your eye movement, your body stiffness, and getting information from that?
Wow. Yeah. That is profound, because as a blind individual, I could see where you would
blindsided by that.
Yeah. Exactly. Not to use a pun, but because as a blind individual, they may have become very accustomed to, people can't see me because I can't see you. Right. Absolutely.
So they didn't guard themselves in the same way.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And so what came out of that?
We had some interesting discussions about it, because they were able to say at some point in the progression of the class, no, I'm not focused on my own messaging as much as I'm focused on making sure I get your message. So that would be helpful to them as clinicians in developing their skill sets.
Yeah. And and obviously this is coming at the very, very end, so I don't want to put another big thing out there. But clearly, as a therapist, you have to become adept at being aware of the message you are sending by your own nonverbal behavior. And you have to become good at being able to monitor that. And obviously, both you and I know, and it became second nature to us, that there would be ways that we would conduct ourselves in therapy specifically to project a message that may have been different than we would have acted nonverbally in just any other situation. Right?
Yeah, I would have this conversation with my wife, because she would say, why don't you have these same sensitivities at home?
Yeah.
In our family.
Right.
And I would say there's on-duty me and there's off-duty me.
Exactly.
And when I'm off-duty, I don't require myself to have the same strictures.
Yeah. But you have to learn that balance.
Yeah.
So hopefully that was beneficial for people. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We are encouraging everybody to go to the internets, find us on the YouTubes, Psych with Mike, and subscribe to the show there. That's super helpful. Go to iTunes and find us, Psych with Mike, and you can give us a rating and leave us a comment. That would be greatly appreciated. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.